the names of the board members are there. And then when they vote, I think it is appropriate to do the oral. Thank you.
Okay. So for tonight, we have our principal, Crystal DeGrassa, Superintendent Mark Gauss, Richie Davis is here, Emmy Sawyer, and Marissa Rosinski. And of course, Josh is joining us as facilitator. Okay, so, sorry, dropped my pen. We don't have any, do we have anyone here? We'll go right on to the minutes, sorry.
You have a public comment. Oh, excuse me. Sorry.
I know, I did the same thing. I jumped ahead of it.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. So do we have, does everyone had a chance to look at the minutes from October?
I did. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second. Okay, Marissa Rosinski made a motion to accept the minutes. Emmy Sawyer seconded. Sorry. All in favor? Say aye. Aye. Or raise your hand. Right. Okay. All votes cast in favor. Sorry. Not rye, but aye. Okay. So then on to public comment. Do we have a public comment?
I received one, Tammy. And just if anybody is out there watching public comment during this period, you can always send it in to my office and we'll report it at the meeting, or if we get it during or after, we'll report it at the next meeting. But I have one from, this is, I guess, well, to all the island, and it's from Mr. Lebo. Rob Lebo sent me a message and he wanted me to pass it on. So I read as follows. Hi, Mark. First and foremost, a very happy holiday to you. I hope things are going to get better for all of us this spring when the vaccine arrives. I see you have a Swans meeting tonight. As part of public comment, can you pass on my best wishes to all of them? They are some of the most solid, giving, and caring people in the entire world, and several of my former students when I was an assistant principal or principal at MDI High School. I miss them all very much. They all stand for what is good, just, and right in this world, Rob. So there you go, and that's a shout out to not just the board, but I think all the good people out on Swans Island from Mr. Lebo, and I echo his sentiments. So happy holidays.
We've been lucky in superintendents, that's for sure. We have been really lucky. At least when I've been serving in Richie's, I guess that between us, that's that's a lot of time now. A little bit longer than I thought, Richie.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, so there's no other public comment then?
No, I'm not aware of any, but we'll pass it along if we get any.
Okay, I've got the agenda pulled up on my phone, so that's why I keep looking down. So then we're on to the principal's report by Crystal.
Yes, sure. So I did attach it to the agenda, but just a couple updates I wanted to share. A lot of the CRF updates that I gave you at the last meeting were really reported on the CRF 1. Since then, we've had the CRF 2, which has been finalized. So all spending has been done. All of our receipts have to be put in, and all orders have had to be received by December 31st. So then they go through the audit process and they can start paying us back for the items that we purchased. Just a couple bigger items I wanted to share with you that I didn't put in my report, so you won't see it in there. We did purchase a school van, which took a good chunk of money, and that's really been thoughtful when we did that purchase to help them at our school with field trips. Oftentimes what we struggle with the most is we have one bus and we have one bus driver. And if we can't go on a field trip because, or a sporting event or a musical, whatever the event is, extracurricular, we struggle to be able to get the bus. And if we get to take the bus for one class, then that means 2 classes are left without the bus. So we purchased a second van. It's a 2015 Dodge Caravan. It's got 50,000 miles. So it's in great condition. And our plan with that is to use it for staff. So staff needing to go off island for professional development can use that. We also plan to use it for the students. So when we have, like I said, one class needs to go somewhere, since our class sizes are nice and small, the 2 vans with 2 chaperones will allow that to happen so that the rest of the students aren't impacted by not having a bus. So we're really looking forward to that. It also provides another vehicle for, again, transportation. So especially in those September and October months when a lot of kids are walking to school or biking to school, we oftentimes only have just a handful of kids. And so we don't need to take the bus around the island for just 1 or 2 kids. And so the van allows us to have one at the building and one down at the ferry terminal when we're not plowing. Obviously in the winter, we'll keep it probably down at the terminal just to kind of make it easier to plow it by the school. But hopefully, when spring comes, we'll have that van up there and be able to use it. So that's a bigger purchase for our schools, since, our funds are very different than some of the larger schools who received like a really huge amount of money. But for our school, we received about $84,000 total out of both CRFs. So we had a lot of upgrades. I shared some of them with you last time. And we just continued to kind of get those installed. So our paper towel dispensers around the school are now touchless. We have touchless soap dispensers, which just help with that sanitary and the hygiene at school. The kids really like to have that. They think it's real fancy that Swan's Island has all touchless things. And our sinks have also been almost all fully replaced. So wherever they go, they're always sticking their hand up. Hey, did you see this? Hey, did you see this? So it's been a fun process for them to see the upgrades in the school. And the 2 other big upgrades that I'm really excited about is our K2 classroom got a smart board projector, which is going to be mounted up. And so that means that in the classroom, they've had a TV with an Apple TV, so they can see things through the computer, but they can't actually interact on the board. Like in Michelle's room and my room, the kids can actually interact with their fingertip or with a pen. And so now the K2 classroom is going to have that as well. So that will really enhance our math programming, our writing program, and we'll be able to utilize that as well. And some of our boards were quite old and in kind of awful condition. So with remote learning, having so much of it being, with those boards, if we have to go remote again, we decided to go ahead and just replace those whiteboards in the classroom. And that's going to make a big difference for any kind of glare that we have on our smart boards and just overall use and clarity with instruction. So I'm really happy with how we were able to utilize our funds and receive a lot of individualized learning supplies, which I think just the big message I have for my principal's report is we're so happy to be in school. Our students are so happy to be in school. Our staff are so happy. And we're just doing, I think as a school, a fantastic job individualizing learning, but making it fun. So they're still playing games. They're still in reading groups. They're still actually having collaborative learning. They just happen to have all of their own books and all of their own paper supplies and all of their own dice or card games. And we've just figured out ways to make it work so that they're not isolated, even though they have to physically distance and they have to wear masks. We're really hoping that the kids are feeling like we are, which is that school feels like school. And it's still a lot of fun and they come in just excited to learn every single day. So I'm super grateful to be there, and I'm super grateful to the staff and the students and the families. The mitigation strategies aren't always easy. We all need reminders, pulling that mask up over your nose or not, standing on top of your best friend when you're walking down the hall is sometimes hard. And the longer we go to school, the more, I guess you'd call it normal we feel. And so sometimes we have to be reminded that, oh, wait, it's kind of not normal. And we can't gather in groups still, and we can't all have lunch at the same table. We still have to be spread out. But I think overall, I'm really happy with what I'm seeing at school. And again, just super grateful to be there with the kids every day. And then there's, like I said, a few more things in the report you can read about updates for the facility and things. But yeah, and our bus, I should tell you that our bus is supposed to be delivered this week in Augusta. And then once it's delivered in Augusta, they're going to put the lettering on and put the final touches on. Then we're going to be able to get that bus. Hopefully it's still going to get coated. We're waiting to see if we can get it into another dealership to do the undercoating we talked about, that spray. So we're still hoping for an early January, as long as that spray can get done quickly. If not, we may have to get the bus and then go get it sprayed. But Tremont's been wonderful. Huge shout out to them for allowing us to utilize their bus during the time we were waiting for our new bus. And that's my report. But I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any about any of that or anything that I wrote in the report that's attached to the agenda.
That sounds great. I just lost my, sorry, I just lost the agenda.
Got AOS updates next to me.
The what?
AOS board updates are next.
Okay, yeah, okay, so, can you give us the AOS update?
Sure. Well, boy, I don't know how to follow something like that. You follow like Rob Lebo's gives, you guys the high fives. Then you got Crystal's. I can't top any of that. I'll sure try. I'm not feeling very needed. No, I have to give a shout out. Boy, we sure are blessed. Our principals have worked so hard. They work together. I couldn't be prouder of our teachers and all the support staff and our nurses, but our kids, our families. This has been a total partnership. It has to be. And the fact that we've been able to keep our schools open, really, you got to tip your cap. And I couldn't be prouder, to live here and be a part of an organization like this, because people are really doing a good job, and it's hard, and we know it's hard. I think what I'd say is, since last March, we've worked so hard, but we can see the end zone. Yeah, we can see the end zone, but we can't drop the ball right now. It's important not to fumble. Hate to use those sports analogies, but I can't think of a better one right now other than, we just got to stay hunkered down, hang in there, because help is coming on the way. And the other piece is that the things that we've been doing are the right things to do, and we're going to have to keep doing them for a while just to make sure that we can stay open. But there's a lot of schools, guys, around our country that just they're in or they're out all the time, and we've been really blessed. And I guess if there's one thing we can be thankful for, it's that. And so there's a lot of positives. With regard to CRF, Crystal's doing a great job. That really is building based, and we'll continue to provide a full reconciliation because we're dealing with a lot of money, and we're very conscious of that. The rules change all the time here, and so it's hard to keep up with that. But we'll give you a quick summary once the dust settles here. We're government's transitioning, so there's a lot of moving parts, and I want to make sure the information that you and everybody gets is going to be accurate. Couple things to be aware of. We're moving ahead with our policy committee meetings again remotely. Anybody can join in if you need the link. We're back on a monthly schedule. We did just a real quick piece. We worked with our attorneys and did a review of what we have. We're overall in really good shape, but there are some things that we gotta pay attention to or should work. So that work's going to continue here this coming month. So check the agenda if you're interested in that. And then just folding in. There was a referral to the policy committee. I actually made one, but it's more an effort to be proactive, and it shades into the next piece. So I won't go too much into detail with that because it's important, I think, that the elementary principals work together on some procedures. We've been really successful with our handbooks and procedures. So maybe some guidelines for families, students, advisors on trips, and work with that. And then if necessary, maybe, the board may want to consider some policies, but I think there's some good things happening that we want to retain. So that work typically is vetted through the policy committee. It doesn't necessarily have to be brought to the board as a policy, but that'll be something the principals will work together on, elementary principals, after the first of the year. I think that is pretty much it until we go to class trips. I just, again, want to carefully and respectfully say this, that during this holiday season, people work so hard. We're all conscious of that. And it's going to be a little different this holiday season if we want to continue to do the things that are going to get us to that end zone, keeping our schools open. So I know sacrifices are tough, but if we can just hang in there for a few more months, we're going to be in a really, really good place. So I would just encourage people to limit social gatherings because this virus doesn't know any boundaries, and it spreads pretty rapidly, and everybody can be doing the right thing and nobody should feel guilty. But the best things that we can do is just limit our distance, wear a mask, stay away from social events, especially during this hard time of the holiday season. That's some of the sacrifices we're going to have to make if we want to keep moving forward, and we are moving forward. So I just I can't emphasize that enough. Thank you, Tammy. And if I'll take any questions, but when you get into class trips, I just have a couple things I'd like to open up with, if I may, on a positive
Yes.
note.
Yes, go ahead.
Can I just add one quick thing before we go into the class trip? Just as an update for the AOS, we did the asymptomatic testing. Mark, I think maybe just a little
Yes.
share about the district. I think that's some really good news. And then we have a sentinel testing.
Yeah.
So we have a staff member who will be continuously tested every 2 weeks, just to kind of continue to monitor to ensure there's no spread within our schools. And so because our staff size, we have one person that will continue that, and we have backup people. So if for some reason that person isn't able to do it, we'll always have a staff member in the rotation. But if Mark, do you want to just share a little bit about the asymptomatic
Well,
district-wide?
it's just, and Crystal, that's a huge piece. I can't believe I missed that. It's probably like, which board meeting was
Good
that?
news.
But, yeah, that is so, I can't underscore how important that resource that we have is. It's totally been funded by grants and donations. But simply put, yeah, we are very fortunate because we did the initial round, what we call benchmark testing. We tested 352 people in 2 days. And then we had the results back within 72 hours. And of the 352 people we tested, all employees, there were a few opt-outs, but very few. What we found were 348 people were, it's a PCR test, so it's the gold standard. It's the one that they will recommend be used. 348 people came back with negative results. There were 4 inconclusive, and inconclusive doesn't mean necessarily that it's a bad thing. It could be a variety of reasons. The swab was defective, or they didn't have enough specimen, what have you. So those were retested, and again, no positive results. So, which
Great news.
frankly was astounding to me. I had anticipated we'd see a case or two, but yeah, we didn't. So then we move in what is sentinel testing. And sentinel testing is you take that large group, think of it as a school, and you break it down into classrooms. So we have 2 cohorts, 2 classrooms that we test. It's the same people. And these sentinels, if you will, these folks are, if you will, they're out on the front lines. There are front-facing employees. There are teachers. It could be, bus drivers, administration assistants, nurses, principals, people, but not necessarily a superintendent. I probably wouldn't be a good person to be a sentinel test because I've limited my contact. But
Right.
somebody for transient, that is a key person. So those people are being tested. We're in our 2nd week of that, and I'm not aware of any positives. I say that I haven't been real aggressive on reporting it out because I don't get the results. I don't receive the results of the individual. Okay, I have to get the results through a nurse, so it's very, very confidential. And I want to make it sensitive information. So, and it's also just geared to our employees. So that's where we're at. We're going to continue that program for the remainder of the school year, which is through June. And we believe it's important enough to consider to have next year. When we get into the budget, we'll talk a little bit about that, but I'll explain why. It's kind of like insurance, but that's the overview of asymptomatic testing. Crystal, did I miss anything on that one?
No, that's good. I just think we've had a lot of board meetings, right? And so it's easy to just,
Yes.
miss that because it was at the
Thank
AOS and a couple others. So just wanted you all to hear the same thing, which is good
Thanks.
news.
Yes, it's good news. And, again, along those lines, the ferries, whether it be Swan's Island, Frenchboro, the Cranberries, boy, it's hard, but people are doing a good job wearing a mask, following the precautions, and that's what's keeping us going. So I just want to say thanks to the crews and to passengers and all the people that are doing a great job to keep our schools open. So thanks.
I will say, I just wanted to I think this is really good that we're doing the asymptomatic, because unfortunately, that's what they're finding, how community spread is that people just really literally don't know they're sick. Just in the past 2 days, unfortunately, I have learned that my nephew knows someone, a good friend of his, that was just diagnosed, young man in his 40s, very sick, and is probably not going to make it. And a former Islander, same way, she lives in another part of the state. So we're blessed. It seems like that everybody is finally, taking it seriously. A lot of people, didn't, and, we didn't have a lot of information. The more information we get, knowledge to me is power. The more we know, what things we can do are important. And, like this almost not quite random testing, but testing on a regular basis to make sure at least a percentage, because it tends to reflect the rest of the school. So thank you for spearheading that and keeping that going at least through this school year and possibly next. I think it's an important step.
Thanks, Timmy. So if there are any questions, again, not limited to this, but just give me a shout out, email me, and we'll always follow up. So if I may, Tammy, before we get into the discussion of the 8th grade class trips, I'd just like to say a couple of comments to kind of preface, because normally these types of things don't come to the superintendent level, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I just want to give some observations. And first and foremost is that we are so fortunate to have the community members that we do, that work hard, support our kids, to give them experiences, and they've been unique to communities and to schools, and that's a real positive. So I just want to acknowledge that. The second thing I wanted to acknowledge is that we're following some guidelines and guidance that we receive from a couple of sources in the schools. And again, I want to emphasize that these trips or activities we've been presenting and bringing forward to the board, and we're going to continue to do that. Transparency is really important. The other piece I want to acknowledge is that these things happen really because of a lot of hard work from teachers and staff members and advisors that guide our students, but our students do a lot of activities, and it's really a community event. So these are all positives, and I just hope that those continue. Notwithstanding Swan's Island, there's been some unique situations that have occurred in all of our schools because the pandemic has hit us all in really, really tough ways. And so I want to emphasize that these funds that are raised in whatever means, if it's school sponsored, one, they're not our funds. They're not school funds. They're funds that we are guardians of, if you will, until they're dispensed. And there are some parameters. So in this case, because of the pandemic and the situation we're in that may limit some of the choices, it's unique. And so we've had to go back, not specific to a school, but in some schools, there have been some things that didn't occur last spring. And principals had to work real hard to figure out, okay, so how are we going to liquidate, if you will, those funds, or provide them for the purpose they were intended? And that's really hard. So our auditors provided some guidance. And I'm speaking outside of Swan's Island now. And then, we certainly work to our business manager, and we're fortunate that our business manager has been with us for 40 years doing this. So I'm just putting those pieces out there because this is something that I think is important to acknowledge for the public to know. We're stewards of the funds. They're not our funds, and we can't, won't, wouldn't, shouldn't spend any of those funds on things that are not for the use that they were intended for. The second thing is that, there's been some discussion, just in fairness, about, funds and setting up outside funds. And I hope that we can continue to get to the place where we collaborate, and that isn't necessary. And that's not in any way, shape, or form to say that anybody isn't doing the right things. It's important, I think, though, to have continuity and make sure that funds related to student activities stay within the school purview. I know that Crystal has worked hard with parents, the advisor, to really navigate this. And I just want to give a shout out to the community to know that we're with you. We'll move forward. We need to make sure that we're working together so that in future situations that come up, there are things that I guess that we're dealing with that nobody ever could have anticipated. So I just want to leave that door open. And say thank you for that. Thanks for the work that Crystal's done. And I think she has some recommendations here that I'm hopeful that the board will receive them well. So thanks. Kind of a long-winded way of saying that we want to keep working with everybody, and that I think we're in a good place as long as we're talking with each other. Thanks.
Yeah, and so I'll go off of that with, again, conversation's been really important. There have been a lot of discussions, whether it's between Michelle and the parents, Michelle and myself and the parents. We've had both virtual meetings. The beginning part of the year, we had in-person meetings. We've also had a lot of correspondence, or some correspondence, through email communication. And I think that it's been helpful to have the email communication follow up any virtual conversations. It also is super helpful when we have all of the 8th grade parents attending meetings, just so that everybody's really hearing the same message, and they're all getting a chance to speak on behalf of their child. And it was really, really nice, as we always have done in the past. And I think we veered away from that a little bit because there was a lot going on with the pandemic. Towards the beginning of the year, not that all the students attended the meeting. And so the most recent meeting we had, which I think was our most successful, the students were on the call with us. And they were able to participate with their families. And that means the most to me because this is their trip. It's really their decisions, and we're here to guide them, but we're not here to tell them how to do things. We're really here to listen to them, to hear what their hopes are, their dreams are, because everything they know is from other 8th graders, right? So they've dreamed of this since who knows, right? Maybe kindergarten, maybe 4. They've watched brothers and sisters and cousins and uncles and aunts take these amazing trips. And I just can't help but validate what Mark said. We recognize how important they are. I came from a very small town. We didn't do anything like this at all. We never really left our area until maybe when we were in high school, we got to go on a big trip. So I can't even imagine what, I didn't know what an 8th grade promotion was, or an 8th grade class trip. I mean, we thought we'd go across the border to Canada, went to the mall, and that was a big deal, right? So to hear kids are going to DC and Virginia and Florida, I remember I took a class to New York City. I mean, I could never have imagined that. But lucky for these kids, they can imagine that, right? That's been a part of their childhood, is they've watched these trips. And so, they dream of Hawaii. They don't just dream of Boston, they dream of Hawaii and they settle with DC, and that's kind of, I think, where we are right now is, they have these huge dreams for this trip, and we want to be here to support that. So I think all in all, again, I know kind of long-winded, we've had a lot of communication about this with parents. I also was able to talk with Nancy, our business manager, who was able to speak with our auditor, just to kind of get some guidance and some guidelines for us to really follow. Again, like Mark said, last year, due to the pandemic, some classes decided not to hold those funds over like we did. So our current 9th graders still have their funds available for a trip. There were no other schools in our district that did that. Those funds were divvied up in other educational opportunities. So it's not new to our district that those funds were used in other ways. We're just very hopeful, because of this being such a big deal to our students, just like it was to our current freshmen, that we can offer them a trip. That's what our freshman students asked for last year. They didn't want anything else. They didn't want other devices or opportunities. They wanted their 8th grade trip. And so that's what we're going to try to honor with that class. And that's what we're going to try to honor with our current 8th graders. So what we've done, the parents asked if we could try to get some more clarity from our auditor on what would be an approved educational opportunity. And I just wanted to share a couple of those that the students generated. So with Michelle, I asked Michelle to take the students one day and just ask them, if you couldn't take the trip, what would you like to see the money used for? So they gave ideas as things like tickets to an aquarium, the trampoline park, Funtown Splashtown, Six Flags, a whitewater rafting trip, maybe going to the planetarium, or even going to a movie theater. Again, on Swans, those are a big deal. They also asked for things like maybe a coastal flight from Bar Harbor to Boston. Maybe they could do other things while they're in Boston, but that there's a coastal flight that they could observe the coast with. Possibly a high school trip so that those students who knew that they were interested in larger trips like going to Greece or going to Mexico, that maybe the funds could be utilized so they could have that experience at a larger level at the high school. They also talked about things like a laptop or maybe an iPad, some kind of technology device, or even for college expenses. We have students, who have the Island Institute has been supporting them in taking, college level courses at very young ages. And we have students that are interested in taking that even now, as they move into their high school years. So all of those were deemed appropriate and would be a good use of the funds. And so I hope that is reassuring to the board as well as to the families that, there's not really this big, black line, that says that it has to be just one thing. It's really a gray line, and it's about providing an opportunity. And so as long as we can frame it that it's an educational opportunity, there shouldn't be any problem utilizing those funds in ways the kids are super excited. And they still feel like a trip in some ways. So this is what I've shared with parents, and I just want to share, the same exact words I shared with parents. The information from James Wadman, who's our auditor, was shared with the parents, similar to what I shared with you. And this is what I shared with the parents. The plan for the school moving forward is to go ahead with Michelle continuing to plan the trip. Again, thinking about multiple avenues. So not just DC, but maybe DC, maybe Boston, maybe something just related to Maine. So just kind of keep thinking about those 3 areas. She's going to continue to oversee fundraising of the school fundraisers. So things that we've done that we continue to do are like the bottles and cans where people drop those off at the school and the parents or grandparents or family members take those off, and those funds are collected at the school and kept with the school. We also have donations. I know the co-op does a wonderful job. We're so grateful for them. They have a can and they collect money at the co-op, and every couple of weeks or months, all of a sudden we get this envelope from the co-op, and it's just amazing, right? How many people just care so much about these kids. And then throughout the year, we also get asked, how can I make a donation? I'm not on the island. I can't participate in fundraisers. Can I send a check? So those are typical donations and fundraisers that the school does that will continue. And any of those funds will just get put into the student account like it always has. And any fundraisers that Michelle and the girls determine that they're going to participate in or to hold, will obviously make sure that they're doing all the mitigation. So the physical distancing, the mask wearing, all of that safety precautions will be there, and they won't interfere with any private fundraising that might be happening through the 8th grade parents. And we think that's important. I mean, we have private fundraisers on the island in different years, and sometimes that money is donated back to the school, and sometimes it's a fundraiser for another cause, and the school, we're not interfering with any of those, so there won't be like overlapping fundraisers. Our hope is just to support these girls and their trip, and so however they raise funds, that's what matters, is that they have enough funds to support them when they're ready at whatever point that is in taking a trip. And that if for some reason the funds collected through the school are not able to be used for a class trip, they will definitely be used for the promotion, which is a kind of a costly event in and of itself, with all of the decorations and the food and the drinks, and hopefully it's a large gathering and the whole community can be there. If not, we get creative with the funds like we did last year, and we bought decorations for vehicles, and I don't know how many stores I went to find window markers, which was not easy during a pandemic. But trying to find window markers so they could decorate their cars, and just other ways that we can make it really special. So the promotion will still have the funds be used for that. And then those educational opportunities that I kind of listed off some examples would be considered. And the final thought, just to kind of say, just so everybody hears, historically, anything that's fundraised is utilized every single year the exact same way. It's utilized for promotion and any expenses that come with promotion. It's utilized for a class trip in whatever nature that is. And then anything that's left over, because oftentimes because the community is so wonderful, as we saw from the recent private donations that were made through the fundraisers that the parents did, which were amazing and so successful, is that this community is very giving. And often the money raised exceeds what is needed for a class trip and for promotion. And so what that does is it gives us two things. So the money that is not used for promotion or a class trip always gets carried over. And there's about $1,000 to $1,500 that is never used just for that sake of an emergency, because you don't know when someone's on a class trip and the credit card is denied and we have to use another credit card, or when the hotel they thought they were going to stay at is absolutely unacceptable and they have to go book at another hotel, or there's a super fun event that they didn't know about that was happening in that city and the kids would love to go to it, and it's an amazing opportunity. And so there's always a little bit of wiggle room with that $1,000 to $1,500 that just says, hey, if another student shows up that's not in that class, they still get to go because we've got money. Or if another opportunity comes up, they can still take that because there's this little bit of like wiggle room. And then the final thing would be after the 1,500 or 1,000, we keep for that. After promotion and after the class trip, anything that's left just gets carried over. And we start the next year with a balance. And that just helps. So if the trip's going to be $8,000 and $2,000 was carried over from the year before, then the class only has to fundraise for $6,000, because we know that that money is coming from the same people. We're asking every year from the same community. And so if there's $2,000 left over, that's really important that that goes into that next year's fundraising efforts, especially because our class sizes change so drastically from year to year. So when you go from a class of 2 that have to fundraise for maybe $4,000 to $8,000 to a class that might be 7, and then they have to fundraise for $15,000 to get a very similar experience, it's hard to ask the community to come up with that much money. And so I think that carryover money, just like we do in our budget, is also super important. So I just want to be transparent about the way the money's spent, and how we're looking to move forward this year is not any different than any year in the past. We just have to be prepared and be honest with the girls so we don't shock them if for some reason a trip isn't possible. And my final thought, just so you know, Michelle and I are constantly checking travel restrictions and travel guidelines. And Michelle's working with the girls to really think about when is the right time to actually make a proposal to the board. Because right now it's not the right time. They can't even travel into our state and get tested within 5 to 7 days. So, you know, people are having to quarantine for 10 days and missing school, you know, to quarantine or wait for test results doesn't seem like a good or a logical idea. So we're not going to put a proposal that would potentially have our students missing more school when they return in May or June. But a lot could change. We're also looking at the differences in things like cost. Obviously, one of the best perks about DC is that most of the museums and the attractions are free. Unfortunately, most of the museums and attractions aren't open right now because they haven't been able to boost back. And because they're free, they're going to be limited, and they're probably going to open a lot slower than places like Boston, who actually need to open to be able to survive because they charge visitors. So all of those things are really being discussed with the girls as well, which I think as much as we can, we teach resiliency in our children, and that's our job at school. And so I think that they're having to troubleshoot a lot of really intense, I guess I'd say, questions or dilemmas. And so I think it's going to make them that much stronger. And whatever they get from, you know, the funds that are raised, I know they're going to be super appreciative because they're a wonderful group of girls. And like I said, when they brainstormed with Michelle, they got just as excited brainstorming the educational opportunities as they were brainstorming all of the trip ideas that they have. So I'm hopeful that, again, like Mark said, we continue to work together with the families and with the girls, and just make sure that the community knows that our goal is the same as it is any other year. It's to provide the best opportunity we can for all of our students. Thank you.
Tammy, I think you're muted. I guess if there's any questions from Tammy, you still with us? Yeah, you're muted right now. I guess while Tammy's trying to unmute, does any board member have a question for us? So I guess what I'd say is you're going to continue to receive updates. Oh, there we go,
There we
Tammy.
go. Finally, I had to go through the master button to get it to work. Yes, so just thank you, Crystal, for that. And one of the things that I would like to bring back is that we talked about like the downtime from school as it always used to be in summer. The only reason it changed to school year time was there was a specific teacher that helped his parents at a potato farm, and he had to go early. I mean, so that's something the kids could discuss too. So if they do have to do that intense, come home and quarantine because there's no testing available, then it wouldn't impact their school. So that's something else to consider too, because originally that's how it was set up, and it just, as you know, I've been around so long now. It was actually with my daughter, the year before she was 8th grade, that changed, and I do always have that aspect of that we tend to go on the most dangerous weekend of the year for traveling as well. It's always Memorial Day weekend, which is notoriously, since 911, is really bad. So those are some other things that we can think about too, to make it safer so they have more options. So did we have any public comment regarding that at all, or is that for the 8th grade? No.
Not aware of any.
Okay, so now on to the heavy, the heavy subject for the end of the year, our 22 budget. Mark, you want to start out with that?
Yeah, just some overarching comments before, any information. So Crystal wants to provide. So first of all, again, everybody knows we're in a pandemic. It's a confusing time for a lot of things, the economy, and you hear a lot about these CRF funds, Corona relief funds. You hear a lot about projections for the economy, and I think it's just an observation that we're moving into some times that may be uncertain, but we don't know. This money that is coming from the federal government to the states is being used by different states differently. We, in the state of Maine, we've been really fortunate to receive funds from CRF for educational purposes, as well as other pieces. I have to tell you, that's not the case around the country. There are some states that schools are not receiving anywhere near the type of support, anywhere near not just the funds, but PPE, personal protective equipment, and so on. So there's a lot on the plate. The other thing I'd say is, and again, I'm going to be careful. This isn't a political statement, but this money's coming from somewhere, okay? And it's money that's being provided, but somebody's going to have to pay that back. You, me, your children, grandchildren. So I think it's really important that we really keep our eye on this and make sure that we continue to get reports and updates. My thought is that or my sense, and I'm certainly no economist, but the goal or the intent here is, yes, to keep kids safe, to keep schools safe, but it's also to, in some respects, hopefully we are working locally, using local vendors to stimulate our economy, to keep people working. That's the goal here. I think that would be making sure people are aware that, if you don't use these funds, then where do they go? Well, they will go back to, I believe, federal government. But it's been really, really hard with the timelines that we're under. So there's one piece, and the other piece to that is that these are totally separate from our approved school budgets. So people are saying, well, savings. We are not allowed to supplant. So we're not allowed to use funds in any of our schools for things that would have been budgeted for. This is above and beyond, or to respond to the pandemic and try to make sure that we can keep our schools open. And because of all the things that Crystal illustrated earlier, whether it's travel or physical distancing restrictions or That's where a lot of these funds are going, or to look at ventilation and all of those types of things. And we'll continue to go down that road. But we're still going to need to be looking at our school budgets and how we would locally fund our schools. So in short, I think that the next fiscal year, we've got to be prepared to tighten our belts and be conservative, but I'm more worried about the following 2 fiscal years. And I think we want to keep our eye on that and continue to make sure what you guys have done a good job with is and be good stewards of the funds we receive. In the first time for my 5 years here, I'm proposing a significant increase to the AOS budget, but subsequent to that original proposal, we've adjusted some things based on feedback. So I am proposing an operations position, and I think it will certainly benefit all of the schools, and there's no question. And it'll benefit them in different ways. And I can answer any questions on that, but I think it's needed now more than ever. The vulnerabilities of the AOS and what we ask our principals, and in this case, our teaching principal to do, and all the other pieces, we're just not structured in a way that is allowing us to maximize the talents of the people we have here. Crystal and her colleagues are very well qualified, but I don't think she has a boiler license, and not that she couldn't get one. I mean, if there's anybody that could get one, Crystal would get a boiler license. But my point being is that, I think we want our principals, our educational leaders, and our teachers, to focus on teaching and learning and instruction. And so that's where I believe we want to shift more emphasis. They're doing a heck of a job, but I don't believe we've gone to the depth that we really could if we provide that support. So that's one piece. It's $90,000 across the AOS. It would be budgeted on a prorated basis per the formula. I talked a little bit about asymptomatic testing. So I'm going to try to explain this in as easy a way as possible. It's $80,000. It's prorated, so Swan's Island share would be very small. But be that as it may, I had to put that in the AOS budget, or I did put it in the AOS budget. $80,000 is the cost of the total program for a year, for the following year, for us to do asymptomatic testing. Well, why would you do that, Mark, if a vaccine's coming? Why? Well, why would we buy insurance? We're not sure where this is or isn't going to go, number one. The vaccine isn't mandatory. We've got to have 70% of our population in order to reach a threshold of immunity. So there's a lot of uncertainty moving forward here. And if we want to keep schools open, and I hope we do, and I think we do, this is a good investment. And so that piece I took out of the AOS budget and migrated it back into the local budgets. You'll see that come up as a line item. It's going to be a small number. But I also made an adjustment, and have never done this necessarily. It's a gamble, but I think we're okay. Nancy and I agree. I wouldn't want to go any lower, but we lowered the health insurance budgeted projection from 10% to 8%. Nancy and I do not recommend, absolutely don't recommend going any lower than that at this point. Obviously, if it comes in at a rate that is phenomenal, super. That'll be a savings, and we'll adjust the budget accordingly, and it'll go to carry forward. But each percentile of health insurance is about $50,000. So 2% would be about 100,000, and that, by taking that and reducing that across the AOS, that allowed us to keep the asymptomatic testing in while still show a savings in insurance and wait for our rates to come in. Other than that, the AOS budget would have been up 0.94%, probably less than that if it wasn't for those items. I really appreciate your consideration, in that. I think it's important. I hope, Crystal, before she gets into your budget, we can underscore maybe a little bit about the importance of why those things need to happen. But I also think we want to keep our eye on your building. You got a beautiful school there. And we want to start looking at short-term, midterm, and long-term. Look at our population study and start thinking about, maybe we want to start thinking about solar or other types of things, but let's keep moving forward and keep looking at what the next generation of students are going to bring. And sorry if I was long-winded, but there's a lot of stuff and it's coming at us, at machine gun pace. So, Crystal, I'll turn it over to you. If you could just speak, sorry to put you on the spot, but the operations position, if I'd appreciate any words on that.
Yeah, it's a great segue. Actually, so teaching principal now, this is my 4th full year teaching principal, which I'm so grateful for, has never been harder. To be truthfully honest, if I hadn't built my schedule the way I built it to plan my specials every day at 9 o'clock in the morning so that I had a 1-hour prep period, which has become honestly a meeting time for me. Every single day of the week, almost, there's either a nurses meeting, administrative meeting, an operations meeting, a COVID meeting, a CRF meeting. And so luckily in my schedule, the way it's built and the way that Mark's been really gracious with the times, he's built it around when I get to school and up until about 10 o'clock when there's recess. That's pretty much the meeting window for administrators. And I'm grateful because all of the administrators understand the importance of me being in the classroom, but it's hard to not start your day every day with your students. I kind of get off the ferry, I go in, I say good morning. We talk a little bit about what's been happening. I check in to make sure everybody's good. And then I go out and I have my meetings while they have their specials. But it doesn't really give me a lot of time in the building to actually plan. So all of that comes home with me. And then just throughout, my position, I think when he talked about the operations, we put in new paper towel dispensers, but when I take the paper towel dispensers down, the wall's not painted behind the old paper towel dispenser. So it's not just taking one down and it's putting one back up. It's taking it down, painting the wall, first coat, going back, teaching for a little while, then after school, going back, painting the second coat, then going home for the night, coming back the next morning and installing the paper towel dispenser during my prep period. So like those seem like little things, like installing a paper towel dispenser, you would think takes 15 minutes, but they don't, because there's always something layered into the building. It's an older building. A small leak on the roof, which could be one shingle being blown down. I can't get on the roof, so it takes 7 phone calls to find somebody who will come out to Swan's Island to assess the roof. And all of that just takes time. And then the day that they come out, they need someone to show them where the roof was leaking and go through the conversations. And someone that knows the building and all the repair work done, that just happens to be me at this point, because I'm kind of the operations manager on Swans. And so I think that what Mark's saying is super important for Swans. It's not easy for us to contract out like it is for some of the larger schools when they could call 15 plumbers and one of them will come. We have one, because I've called all 15 that I could find in the phone book and none of them come to Swan's Island. So unless I'm missing somebody, we're just not, we don't have the options that some of the larger schools have. And so it does really fall back on us. And so again, just kind of what Mark was talking about, I want to just say a couple things about my position. I love what I do and I wouldn't trade it for the world. I don't want to give up teaching. I love that part of my every single day with these kids. And I love the administration role. But like many of the other principals who aren't teaching, that operations role, that maintenance role, even though they have people, it takes so much of our job. And it doesn't allow us to get in the other classrooms and do observations and be with the children in the other grades. And to me, that's why I do what I do. I do it for teaching and learning. And so this year, I just need to say a huge, huge shout out to Navora. We built my schedule this year. So Navora pretty much is there for the academic content area, so that if I teach the content area, she can then provide all of what we call the RTI, or response to intervention. So I teach the new skills, and then she provides really direct instruction on skills that students are lagging in, or skills that they might need an additional challenge in, while I keep going through the 3 different grades and about 5 groups, even though it's only 3 grades, of studies. And this year, what's been just incredible for her is she knows my classroom inside and out. And so if I know there's a meeting that I have to attend, I can go in, I can give the lesson so that the students are getting the new learning or the new topics from me. And then if I have to go out to finish up a meeting, it's seamless, the transition. And I just give her such a huge credit for this year because, like I mentioned, it's not ideal, but I really feel like the connection that she has and that I have with the students and just their resiliency this year has made it possible. But yeah, the pull on the classroom, it can be huge sometimes. And if I didn't have Navora, if we didn't have that built-in support, it really wouldn't be possible this year. And I think this year is an anomaly. Like we said, we're in a pandemic. So the meetings are more important than ever, that I attend. And oftentimes in the past, I could pick and choose the ones that applied to Swans. But COVID, like we know, doesn't discriminate, right? It could be on Swans tomorrow and we just don't know yet. So we have to be prepared. So yes, the operations position, I think, would be unbelievable for Swans, even if that just created another resource to help me making those connections or those phone calls or scheduling visits or asking when the toilet breaks. I go to YouTube. I'm like, I don't know what's wrong with the toilet, but I go on YouTube and I figure it out and I replace the handle thanks to YouTube, right? But I am not a plumber, just like I am not a boiler expert, but I have to become some days, and that's what we do. And I think that I've learned a lot of that truthfully from all of you on Swans Island. I mean, every person I know on Swans Island multitasks better than anyone I've met in my life. And so it doesn't matter which staff member it is. If we need to put something on the floor or install something in the wall, they just jump in. They're willing to help. I mean, the community is amazing. The community's come over and put sheds together for us, dug out holes for the new mailbox that still hasn't been put into the new hole that was dug for the mailbox. But people are just doing that, and it's island life. So I think it's not uncommon for us to feel that way, but it's also not always sustainable. To have to wear so many hats and juggle so many things just because we're on an island. So I really do support this operations position, not only for Swans Island, but knowing what I do on a daily basis, and then what I hear from my colleagues in administration that they do, it's definitely a district need, not just a Swans need. So I'm grateful it's coming. And I also will just say with the asymptomatic testing, again, like we saw with the behavioral specialist, the psychologist position, we budgeted about $9,000 for our share for Swans. But what was needed, thanks to private funding and grants and the ability for other schools to pay larger amounts, we were only charged $2,500, and that was a $90,000 position. So just to give you some context, I don't know exactly what the number is going to be for the $80,000 asymptomatic testing, but if you do the math of what was needed for the other position, it's not a huge number.
Really?
And what we budget for might also be more than is expected. So I just share that because when you look at the budget, we have not put that figure in yet, but we'll start with where we are in the budget. I'm going to kind of just walk you through first, which is just a preliminary, which shows you what our anticipated carry forward is. That's something that's really important before we start planning a new budget. It's important to look where we are in our current budget. So before I do, let me just ask if there's any questions or comments about the operations director or asymptomatic testing. And then if not, I'll jump right into our preliminary summary of the budget that we're currently in.
Oh, I'm happy to hear that we're moving forward with the operations manager. I've wanted that for a couple of years now.
Great. I think you are definitely in the majority who feel that way at this point.
Thanks, Marissa. And Crystal, just before you dip into the carry forward, one of the things you're going to notice when she walks you through that, and we've seen it in every school in the AOS so far, it's going to raise your eyebrows. You're going to see a number and say, whoa, there's a couple things here. One, we were not in school for a while due to the pandemic. So that's a moving target. And obviously there might have been some things that we did not expend, or we'll have an audit coming forward. So we'll know the exact numbers, but that's one thing to consider. But the other piece is that moving forward, we want to avoid these spikes in our budget. So what the school committee does consider and has in the past has been an approach to kind of keep things leveled. I think it's fair to say that this is not going to be a consistent spike you'll see, but we want to be able to navigate it without burning through it, creating a cliff. So I just wanted to point that out to you. It's probably going to raise some eyebrows. It doesn't mean that we're not doing our jobs. It just means that some of these things might not have been expended, and so that's results in those numbers. Thanks.
Mark, I had a question about,
In at least two schools, it's been between $200,000 and $300,000. Those have been schools in similar size, above and beyond what we projected. It's a big number. The high school's even larger. So that's why I just want to point that out to you folks. Sorry, Tammy, go ahead.
I just wanted to, before I forgot what we're, because going ahead. I am a little concerned about us being really conservative with the insurance, because with COVID, I would expect that the numbers would be higher for insurance versus lower.
So what we're seeing right now, and again, so we get our rates in April. We normally plan for a 10%. Yes, we've been working on wellness, but it's a moving target. Here's the thing I would caution you on. There have been a lot of elective procedures that have been shelved because people have chosen to, or rightly so, postpone unless it's been urgent. That's going to be reflected in rates. But at the same time, when we come out of this, you'll see things that will increase too. And there are also going to be things that we may not have considered yet. That what are going to be the ramifications of COVID, both mentally, physically. And so those are things that I don't think we've seen. What we're seeing for trends municipally and information that's being reported or projections in those areas are minimal, if any, increases. So that's why we are making this recommendation of going to 8%. It's not, we're being very, very conservative, Tammy. But I do think that that's one of the big indicators, is that elective procedures and facts that people have not traveled significantly have led to a dip in some of those services. That's at least what some of the industry professionals are initially reporting. We will have our final rate in April. Last few years, at least since I've been here, the consolidation of our rates has been favorable for us, and we've had a pretty good track record. So we hope we can continue with that. I'm comfortable, and Nancy is very comfortable, and I can have her come to the next meeting, plugging that rate in. And I don't think you'll have anything to worry about with that percent.
Okay, I just was concerned because, it's like Maine's just really starting to feel the effects of it. And I just didn't want them to all of a sudden jump our rate up to like 10, 12 or 14 and not be prepared.
There's always a gamble, but as I said, $50,000 is 1% across the entire AOS. So if you break it out and you look at the impact on Swans, we're not talking about a huge delta. And,
okay.
And I think you guys know that I'm very conservative with this, as is Nancy. We're always, we don't get it. We don't get a chance to be wrong on this.
Right. No, we don't.
Just so I'm clear, the paper that I've got is currently stating 10% rate increase, and we're talking about dropping that to 8 and taking the savings to put towards the testing. Is that correct?
Richie, you said in 10 seconds what took me 20. Yes, sir. That is correct.
Okay.
Good job,
I'm
Ricky.
just making sure.
Is in some ways, yes, we're going to be showing today how some things that are in the budget are going to be used in other ways for the budget. Just like last year, our budget, we moved items from our special education costs for like our psychologists and our counseling services, we took from the budget. So we just subtracted it from our special education lines, about $9,000. And we added that into our additional item line of $9,000. So it replaced something that wasn't being used, but we had to budget for in case, with something new. And that's why our budget at Swans has continued to see a decrease every single year. And that's because we're just really careful on if something is not being utilized and can be reshifted or shifted into another position or another area, then it's not going to ask more from the town, even though it's an additional item like asymptomatic testing. We're not looking to ask for additional money for testing. We're looking just to shift resources in another way. So yeah, we're going to talk about that when we get to those additional lines, that it's not going to come from taxpayers per se, not new funds. Still comes.
Not additional funds.
Exactly, even though they're going to be called additional items. And we have 2 of those to consider tonight. So I think what Mark was trying to shock you before with is I'm going to share a number with you. And it is a little bit shocking at first because you don't often see this kind of carry forward. Our carry forward that we are anticipating, again, Mark mentioned it's unaudited. And that doesn't mean that things aren't going to come up this year and change that number because we're still in this current budget. But currently, we're looking at an unaudited carryover of $484,000. Which is a lot for a carry forward. And we know that. And we don't, again, like Mark said, take that lightly. But when we went into this budget, again, we planned about 1.5 years in advance of where we are. And we didn't anticipate things like this school year not having extracurricular opportunities. When our boat trips are anywhere from $200 to $400 to bring groups of kids back onto Swans Island, and you drop 15 of those, that's a significant savings. When you don't have children staying off for room and board charges, I mean, we had a couple of years where we probably had 5 nights a week, anywhere from 5 to 10 children staying off 5 nights a week. And that's $20 per child per night, right? So you start doing that math, those lines of ours, the room and board, we keep really high. The additional trips that are $45 now for the van. So when students go to school in the morning and come home in the afternoon, those 2 trips are paid for, cost about $7,000, a cycle for that. But then every additional trip is $45, and those are not happening. And so when you start cutting those things out, even though they sound like they're not a lot of money, $45 a day times 176 student days is a ton of money. So those things right there are pretty significant for us to think about in why we're seeing savings. And that's not just at the high school level. It's also at the elementary level. We didn't have the opportunity, to necessarily to do cross country. So then, if kids didn't go off again, that would be us paying for food. That would be us paying for the extracurricular coaches or athletic coaches. That would be paying for the private boat. That'd be paying for Pete's van services or paying Paul to bring the bus off. We also plan for things like overnight trips when you think about basketball, and you'd have 1 to 2 night hotel stays and all of that travel that goes along with it. So I think, as you all know, travel is a huge, huge expense. And just a lot of that's just not possible because of what we're dealing with COVID. So that's a huge amount, just that in and of itself. Another huge amount is something that we've been trying to figure out how to best do, which is to balance our tuition costs at the high school. We know what the cost is per student, but we never actually can anticipate the number of students who are going to attend. This year, especially, we didn't anticipate the number of students who went homeschool or who transitioned to maybe a private school because we didn't know about this when we did this budget. So when you anticipate, like we had anticipated, I think it was 17 students with 2 extras, just in case somehow someone came in that wasn't expected. You're budgeting for 19 students. And currently at our high school, we are only actually having 15 students participating in the school. And so that's a savings of 4 students at almost $13,000 per student. So again, quickly, that money can just be carried over and not expected, but can change on a dime. So again, just like this, unaudited and it's not fully spent. So somebody moving on to Swans Island tomorrow with 3 high school students, that number is going to go right back up because we have to pay for those half years. So again, you're seeing it halfway, not even quite halfway through our school year and unaudited. So a lot of things can change. Another area that I think is really important for us to never count on, but always be prepared for, is we do receive state subsidy. And even though we're not a huge receiver in our district or, for Swans Island, we are a receiver. And we always try to kind of think carefully about what we're going to get and then be excited if we get more than we anticipated. And so when you get more than you anticipate, it means you spend less from your budget. And so last year, when we budgeted for what we thought we would get, again, we shoot low because Nancy's amazing and she never wants to guide us. So she always goes low and then hopes high. And so we were about $45,000 in the positive that we received from state subsidy. So again, take that $45,000 right out of your budget because it's received from the state. We didn't need it in our budget, but you never know how much you're going to get. And even if we look back over the past 4 years and we could average that out and say we get about $100,000 a year, next year we could get $7,000. It just can change so quickly. And what we're looking at, and what I think Mark was preparing you for, is exactly that. We have to ensure that our budget reflects what we could possibly need to spend in any given year, and then hope if we don't have to, that we don't, and we return that to the taxpayers. And that's, I think, what we've done a pretty good job of, is when we have it and we carry it forward, we strategically plan the budget, not to just keep adding new things that we don't need. We actually plan, again, for what we need, and we give back to the community by showing a decrease in the budget. And that's what you're going to see again this year. There's a large carry forward, which we're anticipating, and there's a significant savings that we're anticipating giving to the community for the current budget that I'm about to propose to you. So I'm going to start on the budget. These are like all my scratch notes, but the budget sheet you have is the packet. And what we're going to start with is just kind of go a little bit of a front page to then back page, and then I'll walk you through some of the middle pages because I think that's the best way to go through a budget. So I want you to pay attention to that first yellow mark you see that says $75,000. Again, that's our proposed budget, which is the state subsidy. That's the one I just talked to you about. We aim low and shoot high, right? So we want to hope for a lot of money, but we never know. So again, we're going to ask that, we have to have the 75,000, but in the past, we've gotten over 100,000. So we hope to get that again, but we can't count on that. So that's why that's highlighted, just to, again, remind you, state subsidies all over the place.
I want to take the time to jump in here where historically that's been the case, but I don't think the state projections will be as generous as they've been the last several years. And that's one of these forecasting items. I would suspect probably a 10%. There may be some curtailments coming in. It's one of those things that point out that I think we're fortunate here in the ALS in that we navigate our budgets. Schools that are heavily dependent on state subsidy, I literally in my previous district saw $1 million shifts in our budget. And that's just not good for education. So that's a key point I want to emphasize right now, is that we may see a reduction in state subsidy. So let's have the ability to navigate it so that we don't have to eliminate programs or positions. And we haven't been in that situation previously, or at least during my tenure. And we want to avoid those types of things. So, and that's not normally been part of our conversations.
And then the other two highlighted yellow pieces, we're going to look at two separate lines. So the first one is presenting without additional items, a 15% decrease, which is another oh my gosh number. You guys should be like this right now. Like, what? That's amazing. You should be celebrating the possibility of a 15% decrease. As a townsperson who lives in Bar Harbor, I am not anticipating a 15% decrease, as we need a brand new school in our district, right? So I think that that's a huge number. So go along with carry forward. there's a huge decrease. That shows that looking at the budget without everything in here, I mean, it's pretty close to done. We could potentially give back a 15% decrease. That's not our current plan. That is a possibility for you to consider. I just want to show that to you. The one below that, highlighted in yellow, is an 8% decrease, almost 9%. And that is with the additional item, which is what's going to flip us kind of to the back of your document. You don't actually have to flip there if you don't want to right now. But at the bottom of your spreadsheet, what you see is anything that's a new position, it doesn't just get folded into our regular budget lines. It actually becomes an additional item. And so you're going to see two additional items. One is on the budget sheets you have now, and the other is the asymptomatic testing that Mark talked about. Again, that's $80,000 divvied out, prorated against all the schools. So it's not going to be a significant number for our school. But what is going to be a number for us to consider, and we've talked about this a little bit over the past few years, is figuring out how do we juggle this maintenance custodian kind of position on Swan's Island. Again, I don't mind wearing lots of hats, but I am not the handyman you probably want doing some of the things that I'm doing at the school. We are better to have somebody else doing that. So what I've asked for this year is the beginning to what we had envisioned, which could be potentially a full-time maintenance position. Right now, we budget about 5 hours a week, which pretty much takes care of trash removal and minor things around the building. But mostly it's trash removal. In the summer, when we're not in school, it's the mowing. So again, it's not a huge amount, and it does not take care of any of the things that we have to contract out for, like snow blowing, plumbing, boiler maintenance, heating, all of those things, roofing repairs, just cosmetics of the building. Those things just aren't built currently into that position. And then our custodial support has had to change pretty significantly this year due to COVID. So one, I think masks are really doing a good job, and our cleaning crew is really doing a good job, because the sickness we saw this time last year through flu season compared to this year is a complete night and day model. So whatever it is, it's working. I want to keep both going right now. So what we did with our custodial support is typically our custodian came in at 3 o'clock in the evening and worked until 8. And that was wonderful because that meant the school was empty, except for maybe some after school activities. So really that deep cleaning could happen. So bathrooms could be scrubbed, the floors could be mopped, all the classrooms were taken care of because nobody was there. Unfortunately, though, that meant that throughout the entire day, kids were just passing germs all day, every day. And as staff, we were doing our best to kind of keep things clean, and in between students we could be washing tables, but we weren't walking around spraying door handles. We weren't washing doors every time kids walked out them. We weren't getting to the sinks that everybody was touching the handles of, right? So if you actually took like that black light into a classroom and looked for germs, they were everywhere and they just kept passing it around, right? We were the super spreaders. And so now we've shifted that position so that instead of Helen coming in from 3 to 8, she comes in at 11. And so that allows the morning recess. When the students go outside, the classroom teachers are still responsible for cleaning off the children's tables. So the kids are really good. They take all their materials off. The teachers Clorox the desks and clean them. Kids come back in, they've got a clean surface area. But at 11, when our custodian now comes in, every door handle, every bathroom, every window, every desktop, all of the surface learning areas are cleaned from 11 o'clock until 3 o'clock. And so that continuous classroom cleaning is happening. So everywhere students are going, even things like photocopiers, water fountains to refill their bottles, those are getting cleaned now throughout the entire day. So now we're not those super spreaders because things are getting taken care of as we go, rather than only cleaning at night after we've spread everything to everybody else. But what that's left us with is that the hours that we currently have for our custodian only allows from 3 to 5 p.m. for that cleaning to actually happen. And as we know, 3 to 5 does not allow enough time to do an entire sweep and mop of the school, to do an entire trash removal, to do an entire deep clean one more time of the classrooms. So we were lucky with the Corona Funds money to be able to use some of that. and hire the person that I put into the principal's report, Caitlin Trafton, to do 2 additional hours a night for us. And that has been unbelievable and is what has prompted me to really ask for this additional support. What we found is the night cleaning is as important as the day cleaning. But right now, we can't have the night cleaning. We have to focus on the day cleaning. And so with that, what I'd like to see is we're asking for a half-time person. This would be kind of a custodial maintenance position. Not sure exactly how it would be designed yet, but we're asking for it to come out as an additional item. And with about 15, maybe 20 hours a week, we've put a projected number of somebody with minimal experience, what that could be. Again, this could change, but because it's part-time, it's not 30 hours or more, there's no insurance to it. So that's a huge cost when you think about a position. Oftentimes the position is a set amount of money, and the Blue Cross can be about half of that. So you can almost double the position's cost sometimes with the amount it costs for Blue Cross. So in asking for 15 to 20 hours a week, we're not asking for insurance, but we are, I think, going to be getting a lot of bang for our buck when it comes to cleaning the school at a deeper level after school hours and having custodial support, maybe even in my dream world, a backup bus driver. You know, this person could also drive the bus if Paul was sick. Again, that's my dream world because I haven't gotten my bus license yet that I was working on, thanks to COVID. But, you know, my dream world, we would have that as well. So I think that because we can still give the town a huge, significant savings, it's really important for us to consider both the asymptomatic testing, as Mark mentioned, and the additional custodial maintenance support in a half-time person. So I'll stop there first, and then I'll go through some lines with you. But anything you want to know or questions or comments about either of those additional items or state subsidy? Okay, well, the rest I think will be pretty quick then, because when you see a savings, there's only a couple areas that give us that kind of savings. So let me tell you a couple things about the budget that isn't in here. One is that asymptomatic testing, which I just explained to you. The other is we currently have 10% of a holding percentage for our Blue Cross and Blue Shield. That's what's in your budget. If you decide to go to the 8%, which is recommended, again, the town is just going to see a more significant savings. Because it's lowering the budget. So it's giving more back to the town. So it doesn't hurt you to go less, but you could stay 10 if you chose to, because you're still giving a significant savings. I recommend following the district's recommendation of 8 because of what we've learned. And just, again, like I said, we always try to give it back to the community. So I think we can do that in this case and be safe. And the last thing that is, again, it's a very minimal cost, but isn't completely showcased in here, is due to the remote learning, we learned a lot about technology and a lot about how we had to have things available to us for those just in case times. And so there's an additional somewhere between $2,000 to $5,000 that is a potential in our technology budget that we want to consider. We have money put into our technology budget, so I'm not expecting us to put an additional $2,000 to $5,000, you know, full $5,000, I mean, but somehow in our budget, we have to be prepared for remote learning or additional technology. So I can see us in our final draft budget reviewing an increase of about $2,500 at most that we would add to that tech line. And that's not currently in this budget. But again, as you know, a couple $1,000s doesn't shift a budget of our size at all, really. And then the highlights that I'm going to share with you, they're kind of throughout the document, but we can go to the pages if you want to look at the specific numbers. Our tuition costs are going down, not because tuition itself is going down, but because there's a decrease in the number of students attending MDI high school because of 2 things. One, we have options in our school on Swan's Island to go to boarding schools. And in some cases, that just happens to be some years. There's more students that go to those magnet schools, charter schools, boarding schools than other years. We're kind of in that place right now. We have some families that are exploring that. So we're considering that. We also have to consider the students that are homeschooling and who may return. So we count those students as our numbers. And then, of course, we look at our seniors and our 8th graders. And so with all those things in mind, we're anticipating less students at our high school, which brings down that tuition cost. And so when you look at your tuition savings on I think it's your maybe your second page as well. It's under regular instruction. It's highlighted yellow is the number we transfer to the tuition reserve, 12,310. Right below that, you'll see that our current budget, we have budgeted 219,000. And this coming budget, we're looking at budgeting $184,000. So again, a significant shift, $34,000. And so that's one of the big shifts that you're going to see. And I just want to put a note that that highlighted amount of transfer to reserve is something for us to consider. We now have a reserve that currently has over $50,000 in it. When we built that reserve, I think 2 years ago, our goal was to get to a number that would allow us a couple of students leeway. So instead of every year budgeting an additional 2 students, and then sometimes using it, but most of the time not using it, and then figuring out that that money just went to carry forward, we decided to start making a tuition reserve. So the money would go into the tuition reserve and we would stop budgeting for extra students. So what this current budget shows you is budgeting for the number of students we know could be attending the high school next year, with 1 additional just in case in the tuition line. And then the additional 1 that we usually had as going in the tuition line is going to the reserve. And so as a board, what I need you to weigh in on is at what point do we stop taking that additional student and putting it in the reserve and kind of keep that reserve at 60,000 and that's good? Or do you want to keep putting that additional student into the reserve? Because this year it looks like we're going to put it in with the budget you're looking at right now.
Crystal, when does the board need to take action? I mean, so let's do a little backwards planning here. And the other thing to bear in mind as you guys are thinking, there's a lot of moving parts, but you know, we've got to think about working with the town in terms of how we're going to have the meeting too during COVID. That's on our radar. So we'll be working with Crystal and Nancy and Sunny and all the selectmen and town office to get that coordinated. But typically the projected date, Crystal, when the board has to take action is?
Well, this would be your kind of draft budget. And by the next board meeting, whatever we decide tonight will be brought to a final budget meeting next month. And so in January, you kind of see the final document and you really do vote to approve that. We have sometimes gone into February and still had some last minute revisions. And we had a board meeting prior to the town meeting, and we have actually finalized the budget in February. But what would be preferred would be that we really have any discussion tonight on any real major changes. And then we actually look at a finalized budget that Nancy and I would draft for our next board meeting. So again, it doesn't have to change. I mean, because we see a significant savings, we're not in any rush to do one or the other. But if there is any recommendations from the board on that tuition, it would be good to hear so that we don't keep putting money in a reserve that we could be giving back if we don't need to, or we keep putting that money in a reserve and we stop asking so much tuition.
The other thing, I was asking the question because there's a lot of information you guys have been hit with and a lot of considerations. And so now if there's research that, you know, Nancy needs to do, or I need to do, or Crystal needs, just let us know. And then I think maybe the next steps would be, you know, if you want to consider those options, you could take action at your next meeting. I think the other thing to keep in mind too is this is a good position to be in, and you guys have been really good stewards in navigating it. So I hope, you know, with some of the things on the horizon that, you know, we can look at a plan that'll take us through the next few years here. I think that's, while also recognizing that opportunities to make sure that the funds go back to the taxpayers do. And it's that balance that we're trying to find in all of our communities. I have to say, Swans Island is really, really fortunate right now. There are some of our member communities that are really going through some challenges because of things they can't control, you know, special education costs. And so, you know, this is an important time to make sure that you know, we're asking all the questions and doing the things that are going to keep us in a good position moving forward. And Crystal and Nancy done a great job, and the board has as well. And so just want to thank the community for the continued support. And if there are things that you need or what would like us to consider for the next meeting, let us know. But I guess, Tammy, to that piece, you don't have to take any action until the next meeting.
Okay, I just wanted to say, and I think, Marissa and Richie, because we've had the long view of it, that we know that reserves are really important. We've been caught, we learned the hard way, unfortunately, how important they were. I would feel comfortable, I don't know, I don't speak for anyone else, but I would feel comfortable if we did cap it at 50, because if we hit that, then the next year we just look at it again. It's highly unlikely that we would have that huge hit in 1 year and not be able to plan for it. But that's something we can all think about and let them know for when we finalize the budget next month. But I think we all agree that it is super, super important to have reserves. The town is actually learning from us, hopefully.
Maybe.
Yeah, I've been talking about it for years with them that, we need to have reserves for things instead of taking out loans. It's important to, plan for a bus like we've done. Plan for some special ed things because we found out the hard way. And the high school, it shows, I think the town has faith in us that we're not doing things to cost everybody, because we're all working people. Yeah, we're trying to do the best we can for our kids, but also plan ahead so that we don't get hit unawares and it costs us an exorbitant amount in 1 year where it might be tough. We're all in tough times right now, but I think if we're just really cautious and they see us being cautious, that they'll know that we are taking everything seriously. So just think about it for next time, everybody. But
I just also want to plant this seed too. Oftentimes, people talk about accountability, but boy, oh boy, we can be really proud of our students, our teachers, our staff, our community, our principal. Swans Island is doing an impeccable job, and the results and the data support that. So, it's one of those things you get what you pay for. And I think right now we're getting a really good bang for the buck because of the hard work students and others are doing. Appreciate the support of the board. Thank you.
Okay, with that said, I don't know if I want to stop at 50. 50 is about, well, it's about 4 tuitions. And who knows where this pandemic goes? That's 4 kids moving on. That's gone. That's nothing.
Yeah, that's true. But we could adjust it per year though.
Whatever, 15 or so, that's 5 kids. It's not that much difference, and we probably could absorb it in the budget in other places, but the point of the reserve is to not have to.
That's right. Yeah.
So I would like to go another 15.
Okay. I would agree with that because it's
1 year or 2 or, phases in, but just as a cap, I would like
a couple more students. Yeah.
On your reserves, like your special ed district reserve, we're going to cap that out at 675. We're getting close to that. That's the district, the second one. Typically, a special ed reserve is $100,000. You know that, and so some of our schools have those, and they've kind of stopped at 200 as a number. But my point being that I don't know if you have to set yourself a hard number as much as each budget year you can adjust the amount you'd like to contribute. And keep going. And then when you get to a place you're comfortable, but I don't know if you have to set a hard cap, but you can navigate that on a yearly basis, as Marissa suggested.
So do we have to set a cap? I mean,
I'll check with Nancy. I think the short answer is no, but I think it's important to, like, as a board for continuity, to say, if I'm a taxpayer, so what's your end game? And you could say to Marissa's point, well, you know what? This is 4 kids, so we're going to keep working towards, I don't know, pick a number, 100,000, 75. But beyond that, it may raise some eyebrows. But once it's there, you don't have to add to it, and that helps you navigate it. So I'm going to conservatively say, if just hearing the board talk and looking at the experiences, you cap it at 100. But we'll see if that needs to be taken to a vote. Or I don't think you want to lock yourself in. The board's always going to make the decision ultimately. Well, community will, but the board has to be the steward. So I think right now you could just navigate it just based upon the amount of money you'd like to contribute the year, and then keep that as a conversation. We'll verify whether or not you actually have to vote to cap that local fund.
Yeah, and I'll just share what I shared with Nancy, and Nancy shared with me is why I brought that up is, we decide on the reserve every year, right? And so we are going to put that money in our current budget. But you have currently $62,896 in the tuition reserve. And so the question was just, when you're thinking about what year do you give it back and what year do you not give it back? When Nancy and I presented this budget, we did not. We continued that money going into the tuition reserve because we're not in a year that we're hurting for it. But we know, and this is what kind of prepare you for is we've already talked about next year, the year after that might not look the same. So when we can add to the reserve, we should add to the reserve. But at some point, it's getting it in your head that it's 62,000 this year, 74,000 next year, 86,000 the next year. There is that point of, that's not where we need it. And let's figure out how we take that out. So I think all of that is really valid. Like we maybe think about what a cap number is, but maybe not set that cap number tonight. Richie, sorry, go ahead.
Right. Okay, so that was one question. Was 62 is in the reserve with this budget putting 12,000 in. So we're currently at 50.
So this is the projected budget for June of 2021. So with our current budget, so not the one I'm making presented to you now,
Yeah.
with the one we talked about with carry forward, that's going to set us up in June with 62,000. So if we put this 12,000 in, then next June, we'll be at 74. So the one I'm talking about will bring us to 74.
Okay.
Or a little bit more than that.
62 in there currently. I was working off of
Yeah.
50.
So
Okay.
that's
Yeah.
5. I could be comfortable with about 5 extras. That would be 2 families moving with at least 2 each and still be covered
Right.
over the course for 1 year. Then you could plan the following year.
Right.
If you wanted to go one more like this to get it to 6, I think that'd be okay too. But I could be comfortable with 62 in there and stop for a year or something if that's what we want to do.
Great. And so when I bring back that final, you can make that decision for sure, because we can present both options. It's easy to have budget A, budget B. We've done that in the past. And just look at anything that we come up with from now until January, if anything changes. And just to remind you, we also have in the budget that +1. So technically, if you've got 4 in reserve, you've got 5 in reserve, because we always budget in the tuition line for +1. So if you've got 6 in the reserve, you really have 7 in the reserve, because we're always going to budget that +1. And we always anticipate any student that's homeschooled could potentially come in, and they're part of our anticipated tuition children. So anybody we know of is put into the tuition line. So just wanted to give you that information.
That's why I would want to have a little extra, because there's always the possibility that he goes next year, depending on everything. But so I wouldn't want to cut it short, knowing that that's a possibility.
Yeah. So we're gonna just kind of move into just a couple of real quick items, and then I really could just take any of the questions you have. But truthfully, the only other highlights, you know how I do the plus and the minus, like any big expenses or any real dips, I kind of show that on the budget sheet. These are the couple other items that will come up on that. In our secondary special education costs, those are decreasing in next year's budget. And that's just a couple of different factors. 1, services, but also 2, programming has changed. Students that have different opportunities as they might get older. There's HCTC, there's new marine services at the high school. The high school is offering so many more differentiated classes that sometimes special education costs go down, not because of a child, but because the programming has changed. And so that's part of it. Also how they utilize programming and how they really try to incorporate all students in the regular education classroom. Again, those things cut out costs. So you'll see some savings in the secondary costs for both tuition and for special education. You will see, again, in here, that decrease I talked about with the behavioral specialist, we had budgeted the 9,000 and we're only asked to put in 2,500. So that's one of our significant savings. And then we're going to increase our room board charges due to anticipated charges we think might be coming from either boarding or charter schools. That's something that can catch you pretty off guard very quickly. If a couple of students decide they're going to go to a boarding school, we are responsible for the room and board. We are not responsible for tuition because the state takes care of that. And as we've noticed in the past, that can come back and can hurt you in that line. I also always anticipate looking at the number of students and how they participated at the middle level and what their projected participation is at the high school level. We have a pretty high or a significant number of students when we look at our next year's projected freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors that are very actively involved in extracurricular and athletics. And so when we see that, we also want to budget accordingly, because that could mean additional room and board expenses by things like families renting houses or having an additional home off island. So that is going to be an increase. And you can see that if you want to go to page, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's in your let's see, the section you're going to see that in should be in your buses, which is a funny section, but it's transportation of buses. And you'll see that in the room and board, we had budgeted about $20,000 and we're looking to budget $30,000. Just again, anticipating that $20 a night can add up quite quickly with a big group of students all participating in extracurricular. And we definitely anticipate that with the group that we have at the high school for next year.
Lots of things open up. These kids are going to want to go to everything.
I know, but not only that, but our high school, just kudos to them too. I mean, they're thinking outside of the box on so many levels, and they're opening like interscholastic programming. I mean, my son was like, I wish I was in the high school. They just started an e-gaming site where they can play Madden and get like super cool prizes for being like playing Madden video games. And it's all interactive. And you know what? They can't do interactive sports right now the same way, but an interactive video game, they can. And they've made it super competitive. And the MPA has approved that. That's an actual activity. That's an approved extracurricular and athletic event. And so as they get more creative because of COVID, we have to remember that it's not just our athletic kids who get to have the room and board opportunity. It's our theater kids, it's our tech kids, it's the kids that have never done anything extracurricular that now have found something they love because there's more opportunities than just sports and music. And so I'm kind of anticipating, because of the things I'm hearing at the high school and how much they're doing to really bump up their programming, that we're going to have a large number of students finding lots of activities that they can participate in, which is good, but it's expensive for Swan's Island. So I want to make sure we budget accordingly. But besides that, I mean, we know that our student enrollment is decreasing at the elementary school. That's not a shock to anybody. But our programming should not be what takes the hit for that. And again, I feel it's really important, and that's why I really try to do my due diligence for this budget, to be giving back to the town, but not cutting programming. Because like Mark said, our students are excelling. The supports we have for the intervention, for the gifted and talented, for the reading recovery, for the special education, for the classroom differentiation, they would not be possible without the number of staff we have, without the programs we can offer. And so I don't want to look at cutting those anywhere in the near future, even though our numbers of students are going down, because the way we teach is just different and it's working. And so it's like they say, right? If it's working, it's not broken, right? Don't fix it if it's not broken. It's not broken. So we don't want to go into that. And so I think that when we can still show these savings and not cut programming and not cut staffing, it's amazing. And so I just want to keep doing that as long as we possibly can. So that's what I see in our budget. You're welcome to look through this. If you have any questions today, more than welcome to ask me. You can also email me or call me after the meeting. I can talk you through any of the lines. I think last year went pretty significant. Last year was a big year. We went line by line and made some significant decreases, which really gave us that 6.5% decrease. This year, it wasn't as challenging. One, because carry forward, one, because of state subsidy that we got. And just, again, in terms of just carefully monitoring how we spend our money, what we spend it on, and the places where there's just an overage. And we just are trying to cut that future carry forward down by giving it back to the town.
2 questions.
Mhm.
The bus reserve, are we moving forward going to do anything to contribute to the bus reserve? Are we still going to look for a garage? Where do we stand with the rest of that? Don't forget that I also missed our, I know we canceled last meeting, but the one before that I missed, and I know that you guys voted on the bus, so you probably already had these discussions.
No, that's a great question. So the bus reserve, when we were trying to give back to the community, we knew that we were going to get our 90,000 without putting 10,000 a year in. So we went to 5,000 a year. I don't know if you remember that. I think that was 3 years ago. We projected what we needed. So we are purchasing a new bus. It was 83,700, I think. Plus, we're looking for that spray. So when you think about your reserve, it has been drained down to about 5,000, you could say, give or take. And so what we've done in your budget, when you go back to the transportation and the buses, if you look at the transfer out to reserve, it was the actual expenditure in 1920 was 5,000. The proposed budget for 2021 was 10,000. And then again, the 21-22 budget is 10,000. So last year, we were able to bring it back up to 10,000 and we will remain at 10,000, which means we're already $5,000 ahead of where we should be in terms of budgeting for the bus. So any given year, knowing that we have about a 9 to 10 year window, any given year where we have to find some savings quickly, it would not hurt us to shave 5,000 off of a transfer to reserve or even a 10 and then put it back in years to come. So I think that answers the bus. I think we're going to be completely fine because we're back at putting 10,000 a year for a 9-year window to get us back to 90,000.
Who's asking about the garage too?
I'm sorry, Tammy. I talked
Oh,
right
sorry.
over.
I said she asked about the garage as well. So
Yeah.
Yeah,
Was
and
there any discussion on that? Where do we stand with that? Is that still a
So that
thing?
garage is definitely my baby. I would love to see happen as well, especially because we're getting that bus. I know I brought it to you all and I was super excited. And I still am. And we're looking at a great budget that if we wanted to put something, towards it, we could. I mean, we could definitely do something. The cost we found was higher than we initially thought. Looking at a bus garage, if you really want to do what we need, you could be anywhere between mid hundreds to 200,000. I mean, really 100,000 is your minimal kind of shelling, because you want to have the, the cement platform. You want to have the dual doors that have both the front door for the bus and the back door for the tractor and the snow blower.
Can we also, maybe the board could have a workshop. I think it would be important maybe for you to provide your vision, but I think there's an opportunity. Look, when you're doing construction projects, you're never going to have another better opportunity to look at storage, which is always a need. All right. And then if we can incorporate eco-friendly practices and also have savings in other areas, this is a real timely conversation. So Tammy, maybe we could have a workshop just on this one topic to kind of get a plan. And I think there's a lot of work that can be done without paying consultants and engineers first. Find out what are the priorities of the community, what's the principal's recommendation, what's our forecast, but then at the right time, if you need a professional, we can bring a person in, but it shouldn't have to be big money to figure out some basic stuff. And Marissa is right. And Crystal, all you guys, timing is never going to be better than to consider, the future's now.
right.
Yeah.
You know,
Go ahead. Sorry.
sorry.
One more thing is that I think, Marissa, this is the time to really consider it because you've got 2 options. One, we have a significant number that we're giving back to the town, looking at our budget. It could easily be put aside a certain amount of money that would not really shave that much off of what we're giving back to the town to, even if we said transfer a larger portion this year to our maintenance reserve or to our bus reserve, and we call that money, we actually put it with the title bus garage. Let's just throw a number. I put a budget together for you for the next time with $50,000 additional going into a reserve in planning and preparation for the bus garage. And then we don't know exactly what the next year will look like. But again, the following year, we might be able to put that 50,000, and in 2 years, we could have the 100,000, or we could do a frame out, right? And then we could add in the additional items. So I think that what you're asking is something that I would be happy to bring back to the board, a proposal that shows budget A, kind of currently what we just talked about, and then budget B, which is what would still be the savings to the community if we put an additional amount of money into a reserve to start that building project of a bus garage. And I think it'd be nice to see what that does to that percentage if you look at a number.
I mean, it was a priority for us when we talked about, sorry, Tammy, I just did it again. But when we talked about doing the bus, it was a priority to try to do the garage at the same time, and it just wasn't feasible. So we have the bus, we should really try to get as much out of it as we can.
Would the board like me to present a couple budgets that show a couple different figures and how it impacts the percentage for the next time, so we could finalize the budget with those considerations in mind?
Yes.
Okay.
My battery life is at 12%, and I just realized I don't have the cord up here with me. So if you lose me, I will try to call back in by phone. But that's why I broke in, Marissa. I'm sorry. My warning light just came on. I can run downstairs. How much longer do you think we need? Or
I'm here to answer questions, but I don't have anything else to say in addition to what I've shared about the budget.
I just have one more. Sorry, one more, and I'll do it quick. Where do we stand with the roof or any of the major repairs that happen? I know that getting people out here, just with everything in lockdown, I'm sure that things didn't happen, and I'm really out of the loop. Where I don't have kids in the school anymore, so.
No, that's another great question. So in my principal's report, it's added, but you probably didn't see it yet. So we actually have coastal builders. So 2 things happened. One, Associated Builders went out of business, and they have been our roofer for the past 4 roofing projects that we've done. And so they know our building, they know our roofs. We had a plan with them. So our front of our gym roof was planned for the spring of this year, right? And so with COVID, we weren't having contractors come on the island for the school because we didn't want to be the ones that were bringing COVID to the island, right? So that was one thing. 2, Associated went out of business, and they were not able to do roofing projects anymore. So all of their quotes and all of the numbers and figures they had supplied us in the past were no longer any good. And so then it was finding new builders that would be willing to come out and work on roof projects. They were in a similar category. And so Coastal Builders, I spoke with them a week ago. Yes, last week. And they are coming out in January. They're going to do an assessment of the front gym roof. And there is an area that does need some patching, but instead of doing patching, we've already talked about going ahead with the full roof replacement. It's preferable to do it in a little bit warmer weather. Obviously summer, it does better, it sticks better, but it's not a bad thing to do it in the winter. So what they're going to do is they're going to give us an assessment of the roof, and they're going to provide us a quote, which also includes all of the specs of the roof, which is what I need again from a contractor. And then what I would do is I'll put that back out to bid. So the process still takes a little bit of time. It has to go out to bid with about a 2-week window. Coastal, my assumption is, would put in the bid because they're going to provide us with the first bid, which gives us a guideline or a guide number. And then typically for Swans, what I've seen is we get about 2 other contractors, different ones every time that we put the roofing projects. But if you go back historically, about 2 others, which usually one's really, really low and one's really, really high.
really high.
And so we just kind of figure out which one's the best, most reliable. In the past, Associated was because we knew them and they had done a good job. So I anticipate somewhere between February to March-ish, we could have a roof replaced. It could be sooner, but that's my assumption, is that we're going to have that front be replaced, and it's going to have to probably happen during the winter months, just because our roof isn't going to be able to sustain a really harsh winter, especially with the winds that were already being projected for this coming week. Even that hurts because the shingles getting torn up are what caused those pockets, which then caused the leaking. And when we just replaced that gym floor, I'm not really willing to risk that any longer. So yeah, so roof is definitely on, and that money, just to remind you, we encumbered that money from a paving project that was then encumbered for the roofing project, and it has not been spent yet. So any given number, I can't remember the exact number, but I want to say it's approximately 30,000 is still encumbered. And so we should not see a significant need to take anything out of our current budget to do a full roof replacement of the front gym. But there may need to be a little bit, and that will come back to you when I produce the bids for the roof.
We just lost
We
Tammy.
lost Tammy. But yeah, that's a great question. That's actually right on our agenda. And that goes back to Mark's idea of what are the short-term, mid-term, long-term. Again, short-term is definitely that roof, and the bus was our short-term. Long-term, which is actually mid to long-term, we have a plan. Oh, I think Tammy's going to be on the phone with us. Hold on. Tammy, you're on speaker and everybody can hear you. Can't hear her? I'll repeat.
No. Yes.
We can wait a little bit. I would prefer we do, because it does affect the long-term life of the roof. But so if they could give us some suggestions, like, you know, if there's something they could do short-term and do the roof in warmer weather, that'd be something. Definitely going to discuss that with you anyway. But that would be something I would really want to see happen, because I've seen roofs repaired in the winter, and it's not as great as, you know, they really need that 40 to 50 degree temperature to really work well. And we just don't have that right now.
Yeah, and that is something that I spoke with the guy at Coastal, because, you know, my roofing degree is not very official. So I ask a lot of questions, and they're like, did you understand that? And I'm like, no. Can you come back to my language? Because I don't get that. So a lot of those questions I actually asked. I said, so what does the temperature even matter? Can you do it now? And he's like, well, there's a few things to consider. And he did say that the difference is what he'll figure out is the amount of damage that's currently that the roof has taken, as like the number of shingles that are missing, the number of metal plates, the flashing. I mean, these are words I don't really understand, but I'm going to just tell you what he told me. He's going to take all that into consideration, and then he'll make a recommendation for whether it should be a repair to then be replaced, or if the replacement will actually be needed sooner rather than just kind of patching and repairing.
Before I retire, please fix that gutter downspout by the front entrance. That's all I ask. You know, that I just want the gutter included.
Well, we actually need to put gutters around the entire building, because there's no point for having that front spout fixed when there's nothing for it to gutter into, because there's no gutters around the building. It was like a gutter that came down, but there was no actually gutters around the roof. So we're working on, that's another part of the midterm plans, as well as shingling the building, which is another one of our plans that at some point is going to have to happen. Once we finish the roof, we're going to go to the siding.
Yes, I'd really need to.
All right, so any other questions I can answer for you about the budget that I've presented? I will come back with some different models so that you can see what that will look like. We'll also have the asymptomatic testing number in there for you, which will be an additional item that isn't currently in your budget.
Sounds good.
I just, Emmy, do you have a question? You had messaged me and I didn't hear you bring it up about the fundraising thing.
Oh, I just wasn't sure. I know, I guess I just wasn't sure if we were touching base on just some of the methods of communication about fundraising, or how to navigate those situations.
Oh, especially with you're a I don't know if Mark knows that you're the moderator for the Facebook page, for the info page, and I think she's referring to that, Mark. That it's really difficult. She just wants some clarification on that we cannot respond to those things and how we navigate that kind of behavior.
Yeah, I mean, no, I guess guess it would be important for me to talk a little bit to Emmy to find out really what the questions. I mean, there's vehicle. So typically with social media from a school perspective, we're not interactive. I mean, we might give information, but it's certainly appropriate if people have questions or providing information. I think there's a format to do so. So maybe we could just have a conversation, Emmy, in the next couple of days. We'll figure it out and figure out how we can do that. I'm certain there's a way to do it. Okay.
Okay. Yes.
Safely, that doesn't put anybody in a tough spot. But yeah, I just need to know a little bit more about what people are looking for, and we'll figure it out. Not a problem.
Okay. Thank you. No, I definitely honor the confidentiality.
Yeah.
And just wearing those two hats.
Right. And so it might be that we do it through the class advisor. We might be that we do, but let's just have a conversation and then we can update the board. But yeah, absolutely. There's all kinds of ways that we can get there.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
I would just add, publicly for anybody who's watching, the best way to communicate is directly. Because if you want to get the real answers and you want to get the real picture and you want to get a clear message, the best way is go directly to the source, because anything else, it doesn't matter how you respond. There's going to be interpretation from every side and every angle. And so I think that's a lot of times why schools don't respond. And that's hard, because then the school's perspective isn't clearly put out to whoever the viewers are of any message, but it's intentional. Our message is, please come and speak with us. Pick up the phone, send me an email. I mean, I will be happy to answer any questions, but that's the best way.
I want to echo and underscore that, especially from a pandemic vein. It's not like I'm a dinosaur, but I don't do a lot of social media because it's interactive and it sometimes becomes a debate. And it's more about providing information. And then I say this all the time, and if it doesn't come directly from the school administration or website or an email communication, it's probably not going to be 100% accurate or left. So there are ways to navigate this, but I echo what Crystal's saying on anything. Just contact the school. It might be the first teacher, advisor, principal, and yeah, absolutely, 100%. Thanks.
I just think
Sorry, just one more.
He has that double hat.
Sorry, is Tammy all set? Or okay, sorry, no. So maybe you can't answer it here, and we can definitely have a conversation. But I guess I wasn't sure if I was even supposed to say, hey, school phone number is such and such. Please contact.
Yeah.
As far as like being a board member and being hands off from anything that's not, because any of my knowledge I did have was from the previous board meetings. So if folks did or did not attend that, that's not really the platform for me to then be sharing my knowledge of the situation.
Right.
But is it okay that I'm just redirecting with like contact information?
Yeah, I think,
Okay.
look, you're as a board member, you're never not a community member. You're never not a parent. I mean, it's like, so you wear many hats. It's about making sure that we respect, like you said, boundaries. But yeah, I'll have a conversation with you and just to make sure that I'm positive everything you're doing, Emmy, is fine. We just want to make sure moving forward, we're all on the same page.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Just give me a shout when you're available. I'm around.
And that's what just reiterate to what like Mark always reiterates to us, right? There's like that chain, and that chain is important. And so sometimes as a board member, you're a community member and you're a parent, and somebody's going to come to you in any avenue, right? And when they do, your role as a board, I feel like, is to showcase the ways to get information. And so I think your primary role is to go back to whatever that chain starts with. Like Mark said, does it start with the advisor? Does it start with the principal? Does it start with the superintendent? It all starts, depending on what it is, in a different place. But I think any way that you can just redirect is your role, because it is both. I mean, that's why you're a board member, right? Is to represent the community. And so sometimes the best way to represent the community is just to channel them back to the source of wherever that information is coming from. And I definitely appreciate that, because it helps us to find out things we don't know about. Because like Mark said, we don't always know if things are posted on social media or if parents talk to each other or if kids talk to their parents. I mean, we don't know until we know. So unless somebody contacts us directly, we could be missing really important things.
Okay, thank you very much.
So Tammy, because you can't see us, I'm going to just let you know the next thing is that we have a meeting set for Tuesday, January 26th. That is on our calendar. 6 p.m. is still the time unless anybody says something different. Does that still work for everybody, 6 p.m.? At this point, it's still virtual unless things change. And then we would let you know that all meetings would switch back to in-person. But currently, we're still looking at virtual meetings. I believe, Mark, that hasn't changed, correct? And then the future agenda item I have is budget. Really, that's it. We're not gonna probably have much more than budget talk next time, but who knows, something else may come up. And of course, I'll continue to give you updates, probably in my principal's report, if anything comes up from the 8th grade class trip. But really the next real update will probably come from the students and Michelle, like it typically does, with a proposal. And I don't know if that will come in January, February, March, or April, but at some point they will probably bring a proposal forward for the board. And the voucher was signed a little bit before our board meeting. Thank you for signing that. And then Tammy, whenever you want to ask for us to adjourn, we can.
Okay, you ready? May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Marissa.
Second,
That's after.
Second.
A second by, a motion by Marissa Rosinski, second by Emmy Sawyer.
yes.
All in favor? I have my hand raised. Richie, are you in favor? Richie Davis, are you in favor?
Richie's putting his
Yeah.
thumb up.
Okay. All those cast in favor. The meeting's adjourned at 8:11.
Merry Christmas, you guys.
Yeah, happy holidays. Thank you for
And
everything.
whatever you guys celebrate, I hope it's awesome.
Great vacation, hopefully.